Hello everybody, we're continuing our lessons on intervals. This is lesson 2, and in this short lesson I'm going to focus on quality. So all of those interval sizes that you learned, the second, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, and sevenths, all of those, that's the first step. Whenever you're identifying an interval, the first thing you have to do is identify the size, okay? It's what we call the generic size. So you just call it the size, that's the number. And then you refine that by defining the quality or identifying the quality. So there are 5 possible qualities. The qualities are minor, major, diminished, augmented, and a new one. And I'm going to put a big P here. This stands for perfect. Perfect is another quality. And perfect is sort of like the major quality, but not really. So let's talk about the different qualities and what makes them their quality. So let's take the easiest interval first. So the first interval is the second. That is the easiest one, because the letters are right next to each other. So from E to F is a minor second. And this is different from, say, F to G. F to G is a major second. So what is the difference between these two intervals? I mean, they're both just a step apart, right? The difference has to do with how many semitones are in that interval. And it sounds different. That's a minor second. That's a major second. Now, if I had built a major second off of E, it would have been E to F sharp, as opposed to E to F is the minor second. So the letters don't change. The letters don't change. Actually, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw another treble clef right underneath here and show you that a major second built off of E, this is a minor second built off of E, a major second built off of E would require that F sharp there. So you could see there's a difference in semitones. The minor second has a half step. It's really just a half step. So the minor second has one semitone, which is just one half step. And the major second is going to have 2 semitones. And we know that as a whole step, right? So we know the difference between whole steps and half steps. Now, the difference between calling something, oh, that's just a whole step, or calling it a major second, the difference is that the major second, when you say major second, you're just being a lot more specific about the function and the distance and the spelling. It's just a little bit more of a precise labeling, but a whole step is equal to the same value as a major second. Okay, so that's the only difference. It has to do with how many semitones are within these intervals. So now let's talk about the minor third. So the minor third versus the major third. So we know that when we skip a letter, so for example, from E to G would be a minor third. That's a minor third. And a minor third, we write it baby M3, has 3 semitones. So you can probably guess that the major third, if I start on that E again, E, I need to have, for the major third, I need to have 4 semitones. And that would require that G has a sharp on it for the major third. And by the way, yeah, I labeled that major second. So there's the difference. Minor third, major third. And they have totally different effects. They sound really, really different. It's just amazing how one semitone difference can really make the sound of something just totally different. So 3 semitones, minor third, 4 semitones, major third. But don't ever forget that the size is always the same. The size will always be those 2 letters. Notice E to G is a minor third. E to G sharp is a major third. The 2 letters, E and G, are exactly the same. That's what makes it a third. That's what gives it its proper size. But then the G sharp makes it into a major third. That gives it its quality of majorness. And then without that, the minor third, there's only 3 semitones there. So that's what gives it its quality. Okay, so let's go on to the 4th. Okay, so this is where things get a little bit more complex. So the 4th can be what we call perfect interval. The perfect intervals are 4ths. Actually, I'll just give you a heads up here. The perfect intervals are 4ths, 5ths, and octaves. I tend to write it with an 8. And unisons, which you could write the number 1, P1, or unison. Those are all considered perfect. And if you want to know what a perfect interval is, the easiest thing to do is to refer to the circle of fifths. Any letters that are adjacent on the circle of fifths are perfect intervals. Now, this gets a little bit more challenging. The perfect fourth is made up of 5 semitones. And at this point, the way that I highly recommend you do not figure out intervals is by counting semitones. I think it's okay to count semitones for seconds and thirds because they're so close away, and it's really easy to go, okay, so C, if I'm going from C to here, I want a minor second. I know that has to be a D flat, C to D flat. I know if I want a minor third, D, I know it has to be some kind of F. If it's a minor third, I'll go 1, 2, 3 half steps, or even you can think whole half. You could think a whole step and a half step because that's also makes a minor third. It's like do to may. And then if I wanted to turn that into a major third, I'd have to turn that into an F sharp. So that's okay, but once we start getting into fourths, anything that's above the fourth, it starts to get too cumbersome to count out all of those intervals. So this is why I highly suggest you really know your circle of fifths and you really understand how the keyboard is laid out. So the fourth is, we know generic fourth, C to F, because we're skipping 2 letters. There's also 5 semitones, so you can know that. But the best way is to know that if you want to figure out a perfect fourth ascending, you have to think do to fa. So you really have to think of the major or minor scale, because fa is the same in minor mode. You have to know what fa is in any key. So if I'm on G, then fa, I'm starting on G here. I know that fa is C, and there we go. That is my perfect fourth right there, okay? If I'm in the key of G, E, I'm circling E here. I know that fa is A. I know that scale. And I can if I didn't know that scale, I could think, okay, E whole half, and then I get A, and that's a perfect fourth. It works every single time. This is why we start with scales, and this is why I gave you an exercise where you had to figure out the scale degree in a few keys. Remember, we did C, F, and G. So I really wanted you to know inside and out, what's the submediate in that key? What is the subdominant? What's the dominant? That's where knowing that foundation is really going to help you with intervals. So perfect fourth. What if I ask for a perfect fourth, but it's starting on D flat, which is here, D flat. So what is fa in the key of D flat? It's G flat. All right, so D flat and G flat. I'll try not to be so sloppy here. So G flat, that would be the perfect, that would be fa. If I think of D flat as do, then fa is G flat, and then I end up with a perfect fourth. Now we've been doing perfect fourths ascending, but what about descending? So it might get a little bit trickier. So descending, the perfect fourth, if you look on the circle of fifths, I think I need to demonstrate by looking at the circle of fifths. Let's go to the circle of fifths really fast here. So on the circle of fifths, I have a circle of fifths right here. So circle of fifths, if you start on C, if I go up to G, that's a perfect fifth. That's a 5, okay? That's going to be a perfect fifth. But if I think C down to G, and I know this looks kind of confusing, but if you think on the staff really fast, if I'm on a C and I go to G, but I write it in notation down, that's a perfect fourth down. So a perfect fifth up would be the G up here. And this is going to help in our next lesson when we talk about interval inversion. If I start at, say, if I start at F, so F up to C, that's a perfect fifth. But if I think F and then I think down to C, so down to C, that would be my perfect fourth. That's a perfect fourth. If I think F to B flat, so F and I go up to B flat like that, that's also a perfect fourth. That is a perfect fourth. If I think from B flat up to F, that's going to be a perfect fifth. So it just depends on how you write it. And if you're unsure, but you know that you can find all perfect fourths and fifths on the circle of fifths, you could find all perfect fourths and all perfect fifths adjacent letters on the circle. If you're unsure if it's a fourth or a fifth, you just have to write it. So I can just take any two letters, A flat to D flat. Let's try that. So I wrote an A flat. If I write a D flat here, then that distance I've written is a fifth, and that's automatically a P5, a perfect fifth. Now if I take that same A flat, and I'm going to write another D flat, but I write the D flat here. If I write the D flat here, that distance right there, the generic size is a fourth. So I know that I just wrote a perfect fourth. So yes, counting the semitones in a perfect fourth, 5 semitones, I think it's really cumbersome. So if you have to do that to check yourself, do it, but it's always gonna take you a long time to do it. So I highly recommend instead, and this is how musicians think about it. So we think about the distances, how it feels on our fingers and how it feels on the keyboard or on our instrument. We just have those distances memorized tactily, is that the word? In a tactile kind of way where we can feel those distances in our fingers. This is why actually there are a lot of blind pianists where it kind of doesn't matter if you can see or not to play piano, because you can really feel these distances in your hands, and just even if you're like leaping and jumping all over the keyboard, you still just start to memorize these distances. So we feel it in our fingers. I highly recommend you start playing these distances on your instrument, no matter what your instrument is. And of course, I highly recommend doing this on piano because piano is laid out so well.